Last week, as we launched into our message, part 4 of our series, God, the source of our strength, even when it's dark, I shared with you, I already knew that the subject was so weighty that it in itself would need a part 2. And so we're back here today to talk about even when it's dark, to talk about that taboo subject of depression. Since sharing in that message on last week, many of you shared with me that you were caught off guard and that you left here with some questions about this common yet almost not talked about subject, especially in the African American community and especially among men who, according to the statistics, suffer with it more than others. 1 John 3 says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers." That is, in body, soul, and spirit. New Covenant, this is my prayer for you, and this is my prayer for myself. The Lord Jesus said that he has come to give us life, that is Zoe, life, the life more abundantly, that God kind of life, that in that life, the light of God shines through, and where the light of God is, darkness has to flee. But beloved, I know all too well that when you are in that dark place, in that foggy place, in a state of depression, it is hard for light to penetrate. And that's when you just have to hold on and know that God is your source, that he is the source of your strength. And you can do it. You are an overcomer. You can come out of darkness into the marvelous light. I hear you saying, but Pastor, you just don't understand. Right now, I'm depressed. I can hardly put one foot in front of the other. It's dark and I just can't see the light. Beloved, when it gets really dark, I found out that's when you have to hold on to your rope and tie a knot in it. Even if you have to tie a knot in it, hold on to your rope. Don't let go. God is on your side. And even as we've been preaching in this sermon series, he is the source of your strength. Oh, yes, he is. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. With God, you can triumph over this disease. God is still in the healing and the blessing business, but just like with any disease, we have to cooperate with the tools that God has given us to use. Somebody ought to say amen. Allow me to clarify the answers to some of the questions that you have, because the goal of this sermon is for you to leave here informed and armed with enough information so you can do spiritual battle with this demon for yourself and even for somebody else you know who suffers from depression. What is depression? For those who were not here last week, in a nutshell, depression is more than the blues or the blahs. It is not the normal everyday ups and downs. When a down mood, along with other symptoms that we shared last week, lasts for more than a couple of weeks, the condition may be what we call clinical depression. It is a serious health problem. Clinical depression affects the total person. It can change one's feelings, behavior, your physical health, and your appearance, your academic performance, and the ability to handle day-to-day decisions and day-to-day pressures of life. What causes that clinical depression? Well, I told you, we don't know what the cause of depression is, but there seems to be biological and emotional factors that may increase the likelihood that an individual will develop a depressive disorder. Recent research strongly suggests that a genetic link to some depressive disorders can run in families. Some of us come from depressed families, whole family systems depressed. Recent, it also talks about how painful experiences and certainly personality patterns set us up for depression. We talked about some of those painful experiences that trigger depression. I shared with you last week how Charles's mother died on a Wednesday, and then two of my brothers coming to console us were killed in a car accident that very next day. We had her funeral on that next Wednesday, had their double funerals on that Saturday. I didn't even know I was depressed, because you just keep getting up and you just keep on going. And sometimes somebody else, a good friend, might have to say to you, Judy, you losing weight. It don't look like you're sleeping well. Is everything okay? So that they can bring the reality to you so you can go and get the help that you need. That's what a good friend will do for you. Those difficult situations, you begin having difficulty handling the stress, you deal with extreme pessimism about the future. All of this can increase the chances of you becoming depressed. In other words, overstuffing your emotional bags and not being willing to realize or understand that they are stuffed as full as they can be, and that stuff will come spilling out. Somebody asked, how common is depression? Well, a clinical depression is a lot more common than most people think. I told you last week, depression doesn't care who you are. Depression has no respecter of persons, and it has no respecter of professions. Depression affects about 17 million people in the U.S. every day. 1 in 8 men, 1 in 5 women will suffer at least one episode or occurrence of depression during their lifetime, as well as many children, and 3 to 5% of all teens experience clinical depression every year. It is a disease as common as the common cold. And there is no shame in the disease. I told you last week, you can be godly, have faith, be a Bible believing, Bible quoting, Bible toting Christian, and still be plagued with bouts of depression. Does not mean that you're not godly. Doesn't mean that you don't love God. Doesn't mean that you're not operating in faith. Yes, even the size of a grain of mustard seed. It just means that your emotional baggage has gotten too heavy for you to carry alone. But the good news is you don't have to. God is on your side. Amen. And remember, you're not alone. We won't have everybody in here raise their hand like we did last week. You're not alone. Look through the Bible at the great saints and look at the people in society who we laud as heroes, and we find that they also had times of sinking into the depths of despair, depths so deep that they threatened to drown them. Depression can be very serious. It has been linked with alcohol and drug abuse, linked with feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. In the past 25 years, the rate of suicide among young adults and teenagers has increased dramatically. And understand this, suicide is linked to depression. There are various forms of depression. Some people may only have one episode of depression in a lifetime, but others will have several occurrences or recurrences. Some depressive episodes begin suddenly for no apparent reason, while others can be associated with a difficult life situation or unusual stress trigger. Like Elijah, you find yourself just one chapter away from being depressed. Sometimes people who are depressed can't perform even the simplest daily activities like getting out of bed or getting dressed. They just go through the motions of life. Clearly, they are not acting or thinking in their usual manner. Some people suffer from what we call bipolar depression. in which their moods may cycle between two extremes, from depths of despair to frenzied heights of activity or grandiose ideas. You know, I can do all things. I'm God all by myself. I can walk down the street, chew gum at the same time. As a matter of fact, I can go to work, bring home the bacon fried up in the pan. You know, all of that multitasking that we think that we're doing, and we think we're being productive when the reality is we're not. But thanks be unto God, we don't have to stay in the shape that we're in, because depression is treatable. Between 80 and 90% of people with depression, even the most serious forms, can be helped. Symptoms, I told you we got to use the tools that God gives us, right? Symptoms can be relieved quickly with psychological therapies, medication, somebody say medication, or a combination of both. But here is the rub. The most important step toward treating depression, and sometimes the most difficult step, is asking for help. Turn to your neighbor this morning and ask them, do you need some help? But the larger question is why? Why don't people get the help that they need? Often people don't know they're depressed. I told you, I didn't even know I was depressed. So they can't ask for or get the right help. Misconceptions, I believe, misconceptions and myths about psychological help and even medication can impede a person, as can feelings of shame, feelings of pride, or extreme self-reliance can keep a person from getting the help that they need. But sadly, in the church, we have used biblical texts to explain away and to minimize a very real emotion that people deal with every day. Let's look again at the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 1 through 4. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 1 through 4. Did you all read chapter 18 and chapter 19 this week? That was your assignment? Praise God. Let's just look at this text again. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like one of them by this same time tomorrow. Then he, Elijah, was afraid. He got up, fled for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked God that he might die. This is his prayer. Is it enough now, O Lord? Take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Watch this. Elijah experienced the high of a victory, and then a trigger was triggered, and he went into a depression. Jezebel threatened his life. I told you, you read all that Elijah had accomplished in the name of the Lord. And then Jezebel threatened his life. His adrenaline kicked in, causing a fight or flight. Elijah chose flight, but he's not alone. The text says that his servant was with him. Church, even in our darkest of times, God does not leave us alone. I don't know why Elijah did not reach out to the help that God gave him. Perhaps like many of us, he was afraid to ask for help, afraid to admit that he was experiencing depression, afraid to admit that he was scared. Because maybe it was because he was a man of God, and as such he was supposed to have it all together. You know, they say, oh, you're a Christian, You're supposed to have more faith than what you're operating in. That he was supposed to have it all together. And maybe he even felt abandoned by God. He had just done a great feat for God. Allowed God to use him in a miraculous way. All of the gods of Baal had been destroyed. And he had shown God to be the very God, the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. And then he runs. Maybe he felt abandoned by God when the threat from Jezebel came. Whatever the reason, the text says that Elijah left his servant while he himself went another day's journey by himself into the wilderness. Alone, feeling sad, feeling out of control, Elijah is just ripe for a bout of depression. Perhaps Elijah believed some of the myths that he heard about depression. Beloved, we must be able to tell fact from myth, fact from fiction. We have to bust these myths that keep us bound. Myths about depression often keep people from using the effective forms of treatment that are available. Some of the common myths are these. Myth says black people and young adults just get the blues. They don't suffer from real depression. But the fact is, depression can affect people at any stage of life or any racial, ethnic, or economic background. Myth says people who claim to be depressed are just weak and need to just pull themselves together. There's nothing anybody can do to help them. They just need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. But the fact is, depression is not a weakness, but a serious health problem. People who are depressed need professional treatment. I told you, your friend can't tell you, you don't go to your friend. They might be depressed themselves. A trained therapist or a counselor can help them learn more positive ways to think about themselves and to think about how they might come up out of this dark place. A trained therapist and a counselor can teach you how to change your behavior, how to cope with problems, how to even handle those situations and relationships that may have even gotten you into the depression. And a physician can prescribe medication to help relieve the symptoms of depression. For many people, a combination of physical therapy and medication is beneficial. Myth says talking about depression only makes it worse. But the fact is, talking may help a friend recognize the need for professional help. By showing your concern and giving non-judgmental support, come on somebody, you can encourage your friend to talk to a parent or another trusted adult or to talk to their pastor or to talk to their school counselor, their coach about getting some treatment. If your friend, you know how we put everything on our friend, if your friend is reluctant to ask for help, you can get the information for them and take it to them. That's what a real friend does. Somebody in here ought to be a friend to themselves. Myth says depressed people who talk about suicide don't actually try to commit suicide. But the fact is, many people who commit suicide have been giving us warnings all along. Warnings to friends, warnings to family. It may be a statement such as, I wish I were dead, or I can't take this much longer, or I'm trying to find a way out, or you would be better off without me. Some people even tell another person about the plan they have to kill themselves before they actually try it. If a friend of yours talks like this, take them seriously and immediately inform somebody who can help them, get them the help that they need. Last week, we reviewed the triggers and took the quiz to see if we were dealing with depression. And it's my sincere prayer that if you identify with this disease, that you will get the help that you need. 2 Samuel 22:9 says, "You are my lamp O God. The Lord turns my darkness into light. Beloved, the reality is this. Depression is that period before light penetrates darkness. As many of us, if not all of us, have lived or are living in that dark period, I told you there is nothing to be ashamed about. Depression is a disease just like any other disease that any of us might be afflicted with. If you have hypertension, you go to the doctor, you take your medication, you exercise, you watch your diet. If you have heart disease, you go to the doctor, you take your medication, you exercise, you watch your diet. If you have diabetes, you go to the doctor, you take your medication, you exercise, you watch your watch your diet. You get my point, don't you? If you're depressed, you need to go to the doctor, go get counseling, take your medication, exercise, and watch your diet. There is no getting around it. You have to take care of your body, mind, and spirit. But watch this. After that amazing victory where God defeated the gods of Baal and Elijah sank into depths of despair, the text says after doing all that running, and we talked last week about what happens in your body, the physiological things that happen, he gets tired and he sits down under the broom tree and he asks God to take his life. Then he curls up in a fetal position and goes to sleep. Before he goes to sleep, he says to the Lord, just let me die. Watch this. Everyone would be better off without me. If I died, nobody would miss me. I can't take this anymore. I do the best I can, and the enemy just will not leave me alone. For every victory I have, it seems that defeat is right around the corner. Things are not working out. When I take one step forward, I take two. No. I take 5 or 6 going backwards. Nothing is going right for me. I might as well end it all. The last symptom on the depression quiz is this: experiencing thoughts of death or suicide. Thoughts of death or suicide are not uncommon in depression. And it's important to take these thoughts seriously. If you feel like giving up, or if you might hurt yourself, get help immediately. Call a hospital's emergency room. Call 911 or call the National Suicide Prevention Line, 1-800-SUICIDE. It is serious. Don't just write it off that you're having a bad day. Take it serious. Beloved, don't give up and don't give in, because I stand here to tell you that victory is just around the corner. Don't listen to the lie of the enemy. Don't fall prey to these distorted thoughts. Turn your worry, your anxiety, your stress, your distress over to the Lord and watch him work. I told you last week, no matter how dark it is, when light, even the size of the head of a straight pin enters, darkness will have to flee. People who have survived suicide attempts, I told you, I have reported wanting not so much to die as to stop living. And it seems like a strange dichotomy, but it's a valid one nevertheless. There's some in-between state that exists. I don't want to die, but I don't want to live. I I suspect that many suicidal people would take that middle place if there was one. Beloved, what we do know about this is suicide attempts are a cry for help. And I know and I feel in my spirit that there are many here this morning under the sound of my voice, and those that will hear this on the radio and those that will access it on the web, who are crying out for help this morning. And I want you to know that God is on your side and help is on the way. You don't have to go through this by yourself. God will not leave you and God will not forsake you. We have to listen for the voice of the Lord. Experts tell us that people don't usually want to die. They just want to alert those around them that they are hurting and that they are suffering. And church, what we have to do is stop, look, and listen. We have to be sensitive to one another. If someone is sharing with you that they're being plagued with thoughts of suicide, or if you yourself are having those thoughts, don't brush it off. And people of color do commit suicide. Oh, yes, we do. Don't believe that lie. And don't believe the lie that the elderly and the seniors don't also commit suicide, because they do, and the rate is increasing. And don't believe the lie that teenagers and young adults do not commit suicide. Oh, yes, they do, and the rate is increasing. And don't believe the lie that Christians do not commit suicide. Oh, yes, they do, and the rate is increasing. Beloved, because depression is treatable, we need to seek to recognize its presence in our close friends and in ourselves. Often people suffer with it silently, planning suicide without anybody ever knowing it. Despite making both parties uncomfortable, those are the kinds of conversations we need to be having with each other. Don't believe that by asking somebody you're just being nosy or that you're prying. You could be saving somebody's life. People don't care how much you know. They just want to know if you care. And New Covenant, we're called to be church together. We've got to love and care for one another. If any of these symptoms that we've been describing last more than a week, understand you may be dealing with depression. Undiagnosed depression can and will rob you of the joy of living. And it can even shorten your life. Don't fool yourself. The enemy has come to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And he will use whomever and whatever he will. Oh, Jezebel was a real woman in the life of the prophet Elijah. But today, somebody shout today, the spirit of Jezebel still manifests itself. Not so much as a woman on the prowl. But this spirit is one that seeks to manipulate, to control, to cast fear and doubt. But God, somebody say, but God. God is able to bring you up out of the depths of despair. Have I got a witness? Oh, yes, he is. God is able to bring you up out of your deepest valley. He's able to bring sunshine on a cloudy day. He's able to turn your midnight into day, your weeping into laughter, and your mourning into dancing. Anybody here know what I'm talking about? The psalmist said, weeping may endure for a night, but joy, can you shout joy? Joy comes in the morning. Beloved, God is still in control, and that's the good news. It's not over until God says it's over. When I was driving back and forth to school in Kentucky, working on my master's, I got depressed. But I found a whole lot of comfort in the song that says it ain't over until God says it's over. Living in a dorm room, Michelle away at college, Chucky finishing his senior year. It ain't over until God says it's over. The song says, I know the odds are stacked against you. I know it seems to be no way out. But it ain't over. Can you say it ain't over? Until God says it's over. Then driving back and forth to Kentucky, working on my doctorate, tired, feeling depressed, feeling defeated, working with a difficult committee who couldn't understand why I wanted to put a capital B on the black church. I heard the Spirit of the Lord say, He never said it would be easy, but you are a winner. And in the end, Jesus defeated all your enemies. Church, you just have to hold on. Tie a knot in your rope and hold on. Victory is just around the corner. It ain't over until God says it's over. So keep praying, keep fighting, keep fasting. It ain't over. Keep pressing, progressing, keep moving. It ain't over. Keep reading, interceding, keep believing. It ain't over. Keep trusting, keep trying, keep travailing. It ain't over. Keep living because it ain't over. The best is yet to come. Hold on to your hope. I know it gets dark. I know in the midnight hour, mother, tears run down your face and nobody sees you, but God sees you. It ain't over. I know you're still looking for a job and it ain't come through yet, but it ain't over. Hallelujah. Hold on to your hope, baby. God is on his way.